Test, test. All right, perfect. Let's get started. If everybody can just grab a seat, there are some spare seats. Try to squeeze in. We make everyone comfortable. Welcome, everybody. I hope you're having an amazing afternoon. I am now very honored to introduce our next speakers who are going to talk about tackling taboos and, reinventing the healthcare. So the first speaker is Tania Boler, who is the co-founder and CEO of Elvie, which is a British health and lifestyle brand. She's also a very internationally recognized speaker and an expert on the topic of women's health. The next speaker is Wais Shaifta, and since he joined Push Doctor in 2017 and became the CEO last year in 2018, and he helps to work with the health provider to shift the focus on the NHS patients to get more access and to live healthier and happier lives. And last, but by no means least, we have Bérénice Magistretti, who is an entrepreneur and a writer. She used to write for TechCrunch and is now very active writing for Forbes. So please join me in welcoming our distinguished speakers, Tania, Wais, and Bérénice. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. As mentioned, I'm Bérénice. I'm going to be moderating today's panel on reinventing healthcare and tackling taboos within the space. So there are a lot of taboos to address in this space: women's health, privacy issues. So why don't you tell us a bit about what sort of taboos you're facing specifically within your sector? Tania, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. Well, we launched Elvie 6 years ago, and it's all about breaking taboos, particularly in women's health. So when it comes to womanhood, I think we live in such a PC world that we forget that women go through very different life stages to men. You know, nearly every woman will go through menstruation and menopause, the majority of women through pregnancy and postnatal. So it's about recognizing that those are normal life stages, and technology has a huge potential to help women on a daily basis, but because we don't talk about it, because there is a taboo, that hasn't happened to date.
And what about you, Wais?
I'm gonna, hopefully my voice is okay, I'm conscious of the noise, and I never get microphones right. The taboos that we mainly see is mainly around data. So there's GPs usually feel a responsibility in handling data. So what I mean by that is, you as a consumer or as a patient, if you want to access your data, it's not as easily accessible to you. And there's a few reasons for that, but ultimately, doctors and clinicians love to have all the data to hand and personally speak to patients about what's going on. So the notion of a patient controlling their own data is somewhat taboo at the moment, and that's hopefully something we're hoping to change.
But so I think for both of you, it's a lot of it is about centralizing the data, right, and collecting it. But so how do you open up the market, centralize all this data while still guaranteeing your clients and patients that their data is private and secure?
Yep. So from my perspective is that we have to work within the system, we have to work within regulation, and with anything that's new, you need to over-consent. Now, I don't believe at the moment if you give patients all their medical records right now, that'll be the right thing to do. I don't, because there's a massive responsibility with that. However, if you can give that accessibility and you can help them through that journey and they consent to who they want to change, they want to share their data with, I think that's a powerful position to be in.
And Tania?
Yeah, health data belongs to the individual. So for us at Elvie, it's so important to keep privacy, confidentiality, security, but also explain to women why we're collecting the data. So for example, our first connected product, Elvie Trainer, is a pelvic floor trainer. And in fact, by giving women the data about their pelvic floor health, it helps them understand that part of their body so much better. So for us, data is so important. It's a tool. It helps women understand their own health, but obviously you have to respect it and be careful with how you use it.
And so you both have fundraised quite a lot. I mean, Elvie, you recently raised $42 million in Series B, and Spin Doctor, you raised I think a little over $30 million.
Push doctor.
Sorry,
Spin Doctor.
I don't know where the spin came from, but
oh my God, yeah. So 37.5 million dollars. So maybe we can talk a bit about your fundraising experience because you tackle women's health. You're a female founder. You're more in general health. You're a male founder. So how was your experience raising funds?
yeah. Ultimately with fundraising, it's what you're trying to do. And I think when I think of Push Doctor's journey, we launched in 2013. It was a very, very simple concept. It takes on average around 2 to 3 weeks to get an appointment with your GP. And the way you communicate with your GP is challenging. You phone up at 8 o'clock, there's a half an hour wait, you may or may not get through, and then when you get an appointment, it's a couple of weeks down the line. So we said if we can build a product which gives you access to a doctor fast and on an app via video consultation, would that grow and scale? Mm-hmm. And for us it did, and ultimately, and again, thinking of 2013, it was taboo actually to sit there and think you could speak to a doctor online. It wasn't, the consumers and the patients weren't comfortable with it, and similarly doctors weren't comfortable with it. So we had to prove the concept, and we had to prove that this would be an acceptable and safe way to consult, which we have managed to prove. And naturally, of course, as all investors love, they love seeing traction, they love seeing growth in orders, they love seeing revenue drive. And we were able to illustrate all that in a market such as healthcare, which, if I'm being frank, it's still the market which is somewhat behind other sectors. Mm-hmm. And it's a massive opportunity for us to help to bring digital innovation in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for us with Elvie, we're in the femtech space, which is women's health tech. And I suppose when I started nearly 6 years ago, yeah, as you pointed out, there wasn't much money going into the area at all. Less than 4% of all R&D for healthcare research goes to women's health, so there wasn't money coming in. Second, I'd say we didn't even have the language. People thought we were just this pelvic floor company or this breast pump company. And actually, by having the language, by calling it femtech, it helps pull together the different innovators in the space. But third, I'd actually say that 5 years ago, there weren't that many innovative startups even to invest in. Because if you say women and tech, it wasn't very innovative. It's either kind of turn something pink, turn something to a bit of jewelry. And there was really an assumption that women are not early and avid adopters of technology. So for us, yes, we've just raised $42 million, which has been amazing. It's been 5 years of really hard work, but I think it's just staying focused on building products that really solve problems. And then exactly as Wais says, you can then show the traction with that.
Yep. And so I think this is more of a question for you, Tania, specifically about femtech, but oftentimes the word vagina is taboo in itself, which is a bit of a problem when you're pitching investors or you're talking to clients or customers. I mean, do you change the language or do you just, say this is what it is and deal with it?
Yeah, it probably took me about 3 years to say the word vagina in front of an investor. The word vagina is a highly stigmatized word. 51% of the population here in the UK have a vagina. It's an awkward word, especially because most investors are men. But that said, obviously I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an optimist. Things are changing so quickly. We're in the middle of a huge feminist surge, and we're seeing it being played out on social. And words and subjects which were taboo just 2-3 years ago are just changing really quickly. And that's what creates this great environment right now for more female-focused technology.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then Wais, I think one question for you that's interesting that we chatted about the other day is, mental health and how ashamed a lot of people are to talk about it, talk about their feelings, depression, anxiety. And it especially applies to men who really, avoid the topic and would rather suffer in silence. So how do you deal with that through your app?
So, a couple of ways. So I think, there's, when we think of somebody in an environment, it's how we get them the help they need in the best way that they can. So, we don't see our app and our product replacing what's the norm. We understand if we can create an omni-channel of support, that's the key thing, and fast. So we know there are some people that love speaking face to face. We know some people like using an app. We know some people like chat. And a key thing for us is when we look at mental health in particular, if I think of agoraphobia as a good example, if somebody's suffering from agoraphobia, how can they get the support from their GP if they can't leave the house? And sometimes they can do it over the phone, but having an app which allows them to speak to a doctor, we're actually seeing mental health on our product on the rise, and there's a lot there. But where mental health has really been successful for us is in our corporate space. So when you kind of think of the workplace and the work environment, employees are nervous to talk about mental health in that space for a number of reasons. One reason could be, oh my God, if everybody knows I have a mental health problem, something is wrong, I may not get the promotion. So they need a discreet way to deal with their issue. And what Push Doctor allows them to do is to speak to trained clinicians in the area in a way which is discreet and comfortable for them. Yeah. But we're seeing, so we've got a corporate product, but we also have an NHS product. In both sides, the subject of mental health is spiking, and particularly around men. It's egotistic, right? Men, if they sit there and talk about mental health, it's not as welcomed as it could be. But as long as we give them a platform where they can consult in a way which is convenient for them, then they'll get the help that they need in a speedy method.
And are you seeing sort of the part of the app that caters to mental health being used a lot? Is it?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Do you see the part of your app that caters to mental health being used a lot?
No, we do. So, I mean, on average, give or take, around 20% of consultations are around mental health. And one bit of feedback we actually got was when you're consulting, when a patient with mental health consults, sometimes a video consultation makes them a bit uncomfortable. So they asked if it could move to chat. And again, it's just giving the patient the experience to deal with the condition in a method that they feel comfortable with.
Yeah. And so we've talked a bit about tackling taboos in the industry, but then when it comes to the workplace, do you have that conversation with employers on how they can better cater to maternity leave or menopause or, depression, anxiety? I mean, do you have these discussions with some employers, some companies?
Yeah, and just adding on to the question around mental health, there's a high comorbidity between mental health problems and other taboo health issues. And if you actually think about, the fact that if something's taboo, it means it's stigmatized, it means it's not being talked about. So if you have that stigmatized health condition, clearly you're going to feel anxiety and depression around it. So it's compounded with mental health problems. Yeah, and in terms of the workplaces you've pointed out, one of the things you mentioned is menopause. That's something we're looking at Elvie. And for women going through menopause in the workplace, you're facing kind of a double discrimination because there's also a lot of age-related discrimination. But you're absolutely right. We've got to work with corporates. Here in the UK, for example, with Elvie, for our first product, Elvie Trainer, we worked with the NHS. But for the second product, the breast pump, we're working in the US, particularly with corporates, because women are going back to work so early, so that companies are recognizing that they need to support women better.
Right, yeah, great. What about with Push Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I ask any company we go into is how seriously are you taking this? Is health and well-being serious for you? Because if it's a tick box exercise, it will always be a tick box exercise. So the first thing we do whenever we launch a corporate product or work in the workplace is we say, how important is supporting your staff in health and well-being? When we get this is very serious and it's very, very genuine, it's hard because not everybody in a company is trained on how to deal with this. So there's an infrastructure that needs to happen anyway, which supports companies deal with issues such as mental health. But again, what our product does allow them to do is we give management information to them. So, they can see how many of their staff members have come in, mental health issues. It could be depression, it could be anxiety. They can also correlate it to what it is. So it could be overtime, it could be the sector we're in is crazy, or whatever the reason is. And that way it arms the corporate to ultimately sit there and say, my staff are depressed or they're getting anxious because of X. and that information is there for them to use on what they want to do with it. But that's what we're keen to do, and the better companies, which are the ones we work with, they will use that data to make the workplace a lot more better for their staff.
And what are your relationships with health insurances in the UK? I mean, are they embracing these new technologies, these new digital approaches, or they're a bit reticent?
Yeah, for us at Elvie, so our product, we're in the kind of consumer personal health space. So for me as a founder, we very much had the choice. Do we do the typical medical device, B2B business model, working through hospitals, working through health insurance companies and the NHS, or do we go more direct to consumer? My background before had actually been working with governments on evidence-based policy, and I had been so frustrated with how slowly it went. So basically, for us, I think the future for health tech is much more with the consumer. It's about designing products that consumers want to use, taking more of a consumer approach. And frankly, to bring about large-scale change in health through the health insurance companies, the NHS, is just taking too long. So we've kind of dabbled with it, we've tried with it, but it's very difficult. Even health insurance companies here in the UK, similar to the NHS, they're overburdened, they're struggling, and they're moving away from prevention and wellness and more into treatment. So if you are more in that personal health prevention space, it's an increasingly difficult business model.
And you recently announced a partnership with the NHS, correct?
Yes, we did. So we've got a number of partnerships with the NHS. So we've got our first partnership with the NHS was with a group called Modality, and they serve 450,000 patients. We've since grown, and now we serve close to 2 million patients within the NHS. But coming to the point around private health insurance, if I'm being frank, from your Bupas and your AXAs and your Vitalities, maybe there are some representatives in the room. From the conversations I've had with them, they're still trying to figure out their digital solution. So one of their big bugbears, for example, is how you get referrals from the public sector into the private sector. And that's where interoperability comes in and system integration, which is something that they just cannot do. And what positions Push Doctor, as an example, is we can actually be that medium between the two. How do we bring healthcare all in one play? But I don't get a feeling yet from all the people I've spoken to, and maybe I'm speaking to the wrong people, that they've really detailed what their digital plan will be, particularly in PMI. Within the NHS in itself, there's massive gains through the newly formed NHS X. There's a massive focus in digitalization. But I mean, my background is, I come from Just Eat, I come from Treatwell. And educating those sectors to go digital is not a short process. We're talking a 5-10 year process to digitalize. And it's fantastic because the NHS have started that journey now. We're not going to get there fast, but we're going at a rapid rate, and really excited to be part of that journey.
So do you see these various taboos in the healthcare space, as a challenge and an obstacle, or as business opportunity?
I'd say both. So we've launched 2 products, which is more taboo than the other. So the first one, the pelvic floor trainer, is a highly stigmatized space. So the challenge there is how to get people to talk about it, how to create the demand around it. Breast pump is much easier in that sense. So there's challenges, but I'd also say overall it's a big opportunity, because ultimately taboo health issues means neglected health issues, which equals opportunity, because it means that it's been neglected, and yet clearly there's consumer frustration, clearly there's demand, and I think through Elvie and other femtech startups, that's what we're beginning to show.
I fully agree with Tania. There's pros and cons, but I go more on the opportunity side of it. I think, the thing that excites me most about healthcare and what we're doing at Push Doctor is we have a massive opportunity to change the way people interact with healthcare, how patients' relationship with their health changes in this new digital world. And it's certainly a very exciting piece for us. But for me, it does come back to data and data integration. I'll use a very simple example. I'm conscious of time. But when you go to A&E and you're being consulted in A&E, that doctor does not have your medical records. They don't have your Apple Watch data. They don't have any of that. So how do we arm the clinicians, whichever clinician it may be, with all the data that they have to consult you safely is very, very powerful. But secondly, from a patient perspective, how do we arm them with allowing them to choose who they share their data with and who they integrate it with. And I've seen this example in real time. If you give a patient their data and their medical record, they're just going to look at it and think, oh my God, what is this? So where I see Push Doctor's role and general healthcare is, if we allow that integration to happen, but then secondly, we're able to help them make informed decisions based on that data and guide them through, I would challenge anyone in the room. You get your blood test results. If one part of your blood test is adverse to what it should be, nobody really know how to, well, most people wouldn't really know how to treat that. So if we can help them through that journey or interpreting health data, we'll be in a very, very powerful place.
So lots of taboos, but also a lot of opportunities. So good luck to you both. I think we're running out of time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.